it's good to remember what is it that gets us through these difficult times. I know for some of you, being in isolation is quiet and you're feeling nurtured. Other people are busier than ever because you're transferring everything onto online and learning how to use online. I know a lot of teachers are working really hard, the nurses, and I mean there's a lot of essential people out there doing a lot of work. So I know we have the whole gamut of experience right now, and some people are experiencing a lot of feeling of loneliness, and there's other people who are feeling exhaustion or maybe are in a home situation that isn't healthy. So we know we have the whole gamut, and so the only thing that we have, or at least what I know, is what I can trust is love. And so one of the questions we're going to be talking about, we have 3 questions for the dialogue, and one of those questions is, what do you trust? Because in these times that are challenging, we have to start seeking much deeper within us and say, what is it that I not just sort of trust or kind of trust, but what do I trust with my whole heart? How can I give myself to that which I fully trust? So it's a wonderful question to be in. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a belief system, or maybe it's just pure divine love. This past week, Jack, Julian, and I have gotten to watch some movies together as a family. And it wasn't intentional, but we've seen 2 really sort of lighthearted, simple movies. But it was exactly what was needed for our theme or topic today, is nurturing as strength. Many of you may know that we've been talking all month. The theme has been the divine feminine in all. And this week is nurturing as strength. And the 2 movies that we saw was 3 Men and a Baby and Up. What's it called?
Upside.
Up the Upside. And so the 3 Men and a Baby is an old 80s movie. It's sort of silly and lighthearted. It's with Tom Selleck, Ted Danson, and Steve Guttenberg. Happy bachelors living on their own and then together, but independently. And they have a baby delivered at their door, and the movie is just about them learning how to take care of a baby. What was a surprise, I saw it back in the 80s, but I didn't remember it, is that they have the funny stuff of them not knowing how to be with a baby, but what's really nice is it didn't take long for that nurturing instinct to come alive in them, and how deeply they cared about this little infant. They fell in love with the infant, and they got involved in the day-to-day taking care of, not just a moment, not just visiting the infant, but actually being present with it. I love that at one point they tried to reach to their girlfriends or to their mothers to take care of the baby, because that's what women did. But the women said, no, you got this. And and that whole nurturing essence came out. And the Upside with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart, same idea. The Kevin Hart's playing a caregiver, a role that we typically associate with the feminine. But through him caring for Bryan Cranston, who is a character who is a quadriplegic, that deep, nurturing, empathetic energy comes forth. And why I love that so much is when we look at nurturing, it doesn't belong to men or women. That we all have it, not just a little bit, not just parts of it, but we have the fullness of that nurturing energy within, through, and as us. It just simply takes us to recognize it and allow it in our lives. So the question is, in your life, right now, at home, how are you allowing this nurturing energy to be in your life? Nurturing, when I looked both up, I looked up both words, nurture and strength. And strength is about being able to resist a lot of force and pressure. So when you have strength, you can resist force and pressure. And nurturing is something not just about caring, but caring for growth and development. And I like that because it's allowing ourselves to grow and develop, as well as, so we want to rest and we want to be at peace. But too much rest, which may or may not happen during this isolation time, too much rest, we start to stagnate. And stagnate moves away from resting to become a negative quality. So we want to nurture ourselves, to rest, to care for, and when that time comes, we continue to grow and develop, no matter what the outer conditions are. When I was in my social psychology class, now this was over 30 years ago, the roles of men and women were still very separate. So this was taught in the form of, this is how men are, this is how for women are. I want to gain something from that understanding, but not to separate, like this is just how men or women are. But typically, traditionally, in the old understanding of roles, women were there for the everyday challenges of life, and the men would come in. This was just through research. So fathers would come in and play with their kids or do a project with their kid and then leave, where the woman was sort of in the everyday process. And we look at other roles, being a teacher, being a nurse. Those are where you're in the daily process. You're not just in it for a moment. And what they discovered is that in the past, again, this was separated, that men did very well in crisis situations. So if there was a crisis and there was something to be handled for a short period of time, they would come on full force. But over a long period of time, the feminine energy was much more sustainable because it has this nurturing energy. You can only go full force for so long, and eventually the soul needs to be nurtured and cared for. And that actually is what sustains that feminine energy. Women can't keep the feminine energy can't keep showing up to taking care of children, to taking care of ourselves, if we're beating ourselves up all the time, or let's do it, you got to do it, or you're not. That sort of very forceful Marine Sergeant kind of way of getting you to do things. The nurturing energies, I encourage you, I care for you to do these things, but not through threats, not through cruelty, but through deep, abiding love and care. So when I ask about nurturing into our growth, nurturing ourselves into our greater yet to be, this is a sense of deep and abiding love. It's a very healing energy, and it can be sustained over long periods of time. We don't know how long this isolation is going to be. It could be over tomorrow. It could be for months. What we need to start looking at is how do we sustain taking care of ourselves, so we're not thinking just about next week, but over time, how do we continue to nurture our emotional life, our physical life, our financial life, our mental life. And for me, that's always through and as spirit. When I first started to become a minister, it came as a shock. I knew it was going to be hard to get up and speak in front of people, but I hadn't it was a challenge, but it was a challenge I expected. The challenge I did not expect, because a lot of times these things bring challenges we didn't think through or know was going to happen, was the Monday through Saturday of being in that leadership role, which I had never been in before. It seemed way too much, and I got very sad and scared and frightened. Now, for me, the way to commune with this divine love intelligence that is everywhere present, as many of you know, is through journaling. But it could be anything. It could be prayer. But there's a communion. And so what I would do is I would pour my heart out, because I knew this presence was nurturing. It wasn't demanding. It wasn't saying, you stink, you have to do this, I told you. Nothing like that. I was sharing, because it's the one who guided me to be a minister, but I'm saying, no, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I feel stupid, I feel silly. And I would pour all of this out in my journaling, and always just nothing but love. I wasn't berated, I wasn't told that wasn't good enough, or get on principle, that's not the truth of you. None of that. It was just, I hear you, I love you, I see you. And then if there was any specific things, it would address that. So every time I had these conversations with this nurturing, infinitely loving, patient presence, I never closed my journal ever without a healing. That I'd feel so relieved and so loved and accepted and seen just where I was, and I'm like, oh, I can do it. And then I closed my journal, and then an hour later, all those feelings would come right back. It was almost like it had never happened. So what I had to do was every single day, I kept going back to the same issues. And you could say, well, I did this yesterday. But it was so deep in me. The fear was it was real, a lot of fear, and not enoughness was so deep in me that I had to just keep coming back to it over and over and over. And every time I ended with a feeling of healing and peace, and sometimes it would last all day, sometimes only a few minutes. It always was a healing, but it was something that wasn't sustained. And I remember this so clearly, because it was 3 months later, and I opened my journal, and it was the first time I thought, I am a minister. Like, I could feel it. It doesn't make the challenges easier, but the inner shift, that emotional pain that I was feeling through those 3 months was completely gone. It was like it was never there. I had to go back and read my journals, because I couldn't even remember how bad I was feeling. That's what happens when spirit is our healer. The things that we think is insurmountable, that we think are impossible, when we continue over a long period of time, sometimes we have instant healings, but often we don't. We allow this nurturing energy to become a way of life, that it loves us every single day completely, just as we're showing up. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to put on masks. We don't have to pretend to be anything other than what we are. Male or female, I've just seen 2 movies of very soft, gentle men. We can feel the fear, we can feel the pain, but this divine presence will always meet us there and remind us of who and what we really are. But not from a... this is who you are, but you are so loved. It's just this incredible warmth and emotion. And as we go through this period of time, this is something that we get to open our hearts to. So one of the other questions we're going to be asking today is, how do you see yourself, or maybe you already have, nurturing yourself through this time of I don't want to call social isolation, but just physical isolation, but spiritual connection. So in this time of spiritual connection, how do you see yourself nurturing yourself? How is that playing out for you on a daily basis? Because we're going to need it on a daily basis. This is we don't know what's going to happen. It's an entirely new situation. My mother's 86 years old, and she said she's never experienced anything like this. So she doesn't know what to expect. So we need to be nurtured, and none of us are above needing this nurturing. We all need it. We all need to know that we're loved and we're cared for and we're seen, and our fears are heard and felt and are healed even before that we ask. So allow ourselves to be nurtured, and as we allow ourselves to be nurtured, the growth happens. My experience is, so one of the things, as I was turning myself over and over, the pain to the presence, feeling my not enoughness, feeling my fear, the one thing it never said was, oh no, you don't have to do it then. If it makes you uncomfortable, you can just stop. You can just quit. That the divine presence is nurturing us and caring for us, but it is also expecting us to grow and evolve. It is expecting us to continue with it, to persevere, because that's the growth and the development. When we think of a parent nurturing their child, we don't ask the child to just stay the same. We are nurturing it into its growth and development. We are nurturing it into its higher places of expression and potentiality, and we see it in the little ones that sometimes they're afraid to try something. They don't feel like they're good enough. We don't say, oh, then you don't have to do it. No, we encourage them to do it, knowing that they're always safe, they're always free in this love as we encourage them. That is true with us. This is a time for growth for ourselves individually and as a planet. The divine presence is not saying, oh, you don't have to deal with this anymore. It's, how are we going to go through it? How are we going to love ourselves to expand and grow and use this situation for our growth and development? So what is it you trust? And what does nurturing look like in your life, not just for the next few days, but perhaps for quite a bit of time during this year? How can you nurture and develop? And then we want to bring the same nurturing energy to the whole planet. That we know that we are not just in our isolated little homes, that all over the planet is experiencing the impact of this virus. And there's so many things that people are saying about the virus. It's helped our climate change. It's sort of, this is the way Spirit has cleared up our climate, and people are being so much more loving. And on the other side of this, people are going to come out and we're going to be much more loving and kind to each other. And the climate is going to be in a better condition than when we went into isolation. And all these wonderful things are going to happen. And then there's other people who are, oh my gosh, everything's going to fall apart. It's going to be the worst economic crisis that we've ever seen. And it's going to touch billions of people, and just these horror stories. And so we have the whole degree of stories that we tell ourselves about what is about to come. My feeling is the idea that the climate is better, I love that, but I don't love the idea that in order for the climate to be better, other people have to suffer. So this time is very hard for some people, and there's an expectation that the longer it goes, the economic challenges for people who don't have a lot of money, who are in difficult situations, it's going to become much more difficult for people as we go on, and then more and more people. So I don't believe in solving one crisis by creating another one. And for me, what I have come to the conclusion, and I think because you're here, you may have also felt this conclusion, is the answer is to move beyond duality into the oneness. And the ideal is to become that heaven state of consciousness, or that oneness which transcends duality, includes duality, but then transcends it. And so the work that we want to do globally is to hold that wholeness and that oneness and this beautiful idea, this first cause idea of the wholeness and the perfection for all life, for all people, for all animals, for the climate, for the 7 billion people on this planet, for the earth itself, that we open our hearts and our minds and our souls to that transcendent, because of ourselves we can't do it. We can become the vehicles to allow the oneness to know itself. So what I see that I want to be, whether it's tomorrow or 3 months or 6 months from now, the way I want to come out of the isolation is at a higher state of vibration, a higher state of consciousness, where we are open to something that is much more free and unlimited and possible in every area of our life, that becomes an embodiment, that it's not just transcendent, but it's in our very life, that we are walking conscious beings of light and of love, that we are truly lighthouses, that we identify less with the storms of the world, the raging sea and the storm in the air, and we are more centered in the lighthouse, in that pure being of light that is the center of the universe and is the center of wholeness and oneness and peace and harmony. And no matter what the conditions of this physical realm, we stand in that light, that inner light. The kingdom of heaven is within, that kingdom of purity, of wholeness, of peace, of joy, of unlimited love, of unconditional, pure love. I was listening to my cousin, Seth Hawkins, Dr. Seth Hawkins. He's an emergency room doctor, and he was comparing this to the 1918 epidemic. And one of the things he said was that we don't have a lot of tools available to us that are that different than 1918. He said we have ventilator tubes, which work. We just need more of them. That's the big issue, is can we have more ventilator tubes? But other than that, we don't have any vaccine yet. I'm completely open to that being revealed today. So he was saying, other than that, we have the same techniques that they have in 1918, which was isolation. And he talked and he shared, they had these 2 studies, and one was in Philadelphia and one in St. Louis. And Philadelphia caught on to the epidemic a little too late in 1918, and they really had a lot of deaths and struggled with it, where St. Louis got into this isolation, separation. They're doing the same thing that we're doing now in 1918, and they had much fewer challenges, and they did much better through the epidemic. And then someone asked Dr. Seth about how long did it last? Like, how long did they have to be in isolation? And he said 6 months. And that sort of took me by surprise. 6 months. And that was the good case scenario. So what we don't, as I was contemplating, we don't have any tools. And I thought, oh, we do have tools. And here's our tool. And we all know it. It's prayer. And not only do we have prayer, we have global prayer. That we have the internet now, which they didn't have in 1918. We have this power to collectively call out for this prayer to happen constantly. Again, nurturing as strength. Prayer for me is nurturing. And so the more I commit to prayer, and not just during a crisis mode, not just for a moment, but continuously, that this might be happen just for a week, it may happen for 3 months, it may happen for 6 months, but we are committed to doing these prayers. So my invitation to you is, anytime you see a call out for collective prayer. I know Marianne Williamson this morning had a call out for prayers, 9 a.m. our time, but all over the world, for 2 minutes of holding that stillness for wholeness and peace and for a miracle to happen. She invited people to stay longer in that if they could. But that's just one. I know Reverend Edward Villoon from Centers for Spiritual Living is calling for a collective prayer on Thursday. Anytime, and it can be for any religion. I don't care what religion it is. I joined an Orthodox Christian thing, and I read some of their things, and it scares me sometimes, because they really do believe they're the one true way. But that's their belief. My belief is that the divine is all of it. So I join their prayer calls. I'll join any prayer. I'll join Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist. So as many prayer we have today. What we have is the power to be in this collective, global, worldwide prayer. Because one of the highest tools that we have available to us is the power of prayer. And we know about it. That's what we are at the Lighthouse. We're about being a praying community, praying to be that truth all of the time, to be unwavering. There's nothing more nurturing to stand in the truth. The nurturing is to say, okay, I might be scared. When you're a kid and you're scared, you turn to your parent. Well, on the ideal parent, I know many of us didn't have the ideal parents, but sort of the ideal parent is that when you're afraid, you turn to your parent and they hold you. They don't stop. They hold you to remind you who you are, that you're cared for, that you're loved. That's the nurturing that allows us to stay strong in our prayer life. The nurturing allows us to stay strong in our prayer life. So the invitation, you can send the collective prayers out, because you will know about some that I don't know about, and I'll post it on our Facebook page. As much as you can, answer every collective call around the world to pray. So that we are all joining in this prayer work, and I do believe miracles can happen. It may happen tomorrow, or it may happen, the miracle may happen 3 weeks or a month, or worst case scenario, 3 months. But we do what Ernest Holmes said. We keep praying until we don't need to anymore, till we know it's worked. So we keep praying. So that is the invitation, is to up our prayer life. And the third question for today is, what is your commitment to the world while you're in isolation? So it can be very isolating, and you're thinking only about yourself, but we really want to integrate in that nurturing energy is, how am I nurturing the world from my home, from my state of consciousness? And of course, for me, that's prayer, and I think for many of you, it's also prayer. So I want to end with a quote. Ernest Holmes said, and I think it's just important, to desert the truth in the hour of need is to prove that we do not know the truth. To desert the truth in the hour of need is to prove that we do not know the truth. And so that sounds like a negative way of putting it, but the positive aspect of it is when the crisis shows up, we show that we know the truth by practicing it. We don't stop practicing when things get difficult. We practice it with deeper passion and commitment for not only ourselves, but for the world. So I would love to have you join me now in prayer. And then we'll, just so you know the order, we'll go in prayer. Lynn's going to, as our board member, is going to come on, make an announcement. Jack's going to pray us out, and then we'll go into our group discussion, in which case you'll all play your videos or audio, and we'll have a collective conversation, maybe even go off to small groups so you can have talks amongst yourself. Okay? So we just give thanks here and now that as we enter into this time of prayer, that we know that we are connecting with people all over the planet who are praying. That there is a power to this collective prayer right here and right now. That we are standing in the power of the consciousness that there is one life, one power, one presence. That it is already perfect. It is already whole. It is already complete. And that each and every one of us is this wholeness, is this perfection. That it transcends all the human conditions. All those things we call good and all those things we call bad. We stand in that eternal spirit. And as we continue to stand and nurture that spirit within us, that moves from a concept to a living reality in our everyday life. As we nurture that truth over and over again, till we practice it in the midst of all the trials and the challenges, that truth becomes more real, more alive than we could ever possibly imagine, until it becomes so real that we know a freedom and a love and a joy beyond what we can ever humanly describe. This presence and this power already is. We don't need to change it. We don't need to fix anything. We just allow its purity, its power, its love to nurture us into our greater yet to be. We allow it to grow us and evolve us through love, through gentleness, through tenderness, through softness, through care and concern. This presence is infinitely gentle, infinitely caring, and we allow it fully into our lives, in every area of our lives. We don't need to hide, we don't need to pretend, we don't need to put masks on. No matter what is going on for us right here and right now, we are loved. It's impossible for us ever to be outside of this love. And as we feel this love of the divine, we feel this love from each other, that we continue to pour out in our hearts love for one another and for each and every person in this Lighthouse community and for each and every person on this planet. That this love knows no limit. And where people are in need and we are the ones to answer, we answer. When we have something to give, we give. And when we need to receive, we receive. That we allow the beautiful flow of love to pour through us in every single possible way. No limitations. We just say yes, unconditionally, to being the love, to receiving the love, and to allowing the love to dance as us in delight and in joy, no matter what. I give thanks for all the practitioners of this community who are open and available to continue to hold these prayers. For as a community, we are in this together, holding this consciousness. New life is happening. New life is happening as we are in this womb, this divine womb of love. We are becoming new. We are made new. And it is done. I invite us all to say together, and so it is. Amen. And amen.